Okay, I think we're live. So welcome to the 4th edition of the LEIT Data Value Show. Really honoured to have Scott Taylor here. Followed him for many years, seen his puppet shows, seen the Chief Data Dog Officer. The pleasure of meeting him at Ethan Aaron's meetup and then a data-driven event. Spoke to him many times. So without further ado, let's add the main man, Scott Taylor. Welcome.
Chris, how are you? Great to see you. Thrilled to be here. Happy to support your podcast role.
No, and honestly, truly honoured. I mean, we had a little like a brief up in the green room earlier, where we had our whiskies pre-show.
Sure,
it's Coca-Cola actually. So, but I know that when I asked you to come on here, you said I don't do it in the first 10 shows. So to make it on just the 4th one, it means a lot. Always enjoy. You're a high energy, high impact, high entertainment with your posts, and you don't let us down in person as well. So
super.
Welcome,
Scott.
Scott.
To be here.
so the topic of today is selling your data project, and something that been thinking about a lot myself with talking to with likes of Joe and Matt Housley. So we're doing this book at the moment, which is focusing on business value, and the whole thing about business value is selling it. And I did a post ahead of this session, which is data people aren't good at selling, and I think storytelling is part of that, which I quite enjoy. I'm learning myself, but so Scott, what's your view? What's your approach to selling your data project?
Luckily, I put it all together in my book, Telling Your Data Story, Data Storytelling for Data Management. You can see right on there, 99% buzzword free. I did not want to overpromise. And that's kind of my attitude. You obviously need to put some form of narrative together. And when people talk about data storytelling, the way I talk about it, which is, to give it some context, I'm not talking about the classic data storytelling that most people have written books about. There's like 20 of them out there, which I would consider analytics storytelling. Truly,
visualizations, dashboards.
How to put some form of insight in a business context to drive action. Super important, but that also assumes you've got funding. You already got the money. You're already doing the project. So backing it up, how do you get the initial support and funding and engagement from your executive stakeholders, from the business community, from the people across your enterprise who are not fluent in the ways of data or how to speak about it? You got to put a story together. And so my feeling is it's of critical importance because it's how you communicate, and the type of story you put together to get support, to sell it in, is a sales pitch. And so you've got to be able to at least draw on the common principles of sales, even if you're not in sales per se. My background is in sales, marketing strategy. My whole family has been in PR and communications and marketing. So we're all we believe our superpower is that we're able to convince people of things. Yeah. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. Well, I think you're pretty good at that.
So doing that, putting those in play, and that's where I feel my place is in the data community, is help people put that data story together.
So do you think it really helps you with that sort of understanding the building blocks? Obviously, you've talked about master data management. You obviously know it very well. You must have had some experience in your past you've been able to leverage, but you're able to take that story into a communicatable business case, which allows you to sell what you're doing. So is that been a big advantage, having those two worlds collide together?
Yeah, without a doubt. And my background is less in data and more in storytelling. And I've been doing storytelling since it was 2 words. I know it's very famous, big deal now, but it goes way back. And I was just able to have found in my first data job, which was a sales job for a data company. They walk in on the first day, just to give you a little story of how it I began to blossom around this. They walk in the first day and the sales manager brings in, this was back in the day, pre-PowerPoint literally, and they bring in this stack of slides that are printed out in a notebook that's about that thick.
Yeah.
And he says, I'm going to take you through the pitch. And I'm thinking already, this is day one, maybe hour 2, I'm on this job. I'm already thinking, I can't sit through this. This is way too long. And I can't imagine anybody who they're looking for money from is going to sit through this either. And we're going to like, boom, go through it. Just next page. And I'm like, we got to get a better story. And my success at this business was taking this huge set of, stuff about what they did and putting it in a really business accessible, bite size, somewhat pithy where it needed to be, but sharpened around the business value of what they were doing. And that I ended up, because of that, I ended up eventually being the general manager of this business because I led it with a team of great storytellers that I hired.
Yeah.
I led the growth of this business at Nielsen in a way that they never even expected. And the core of it, we used to almost brag about it. We haven't changed our deliverables. We haven't changed what we do for a living. We've just changed the story around it. And so the power of being able to communicate in this fashion in this case, and I think a lot of data professionals suffer from this as well, you're talking to people who already understand your language.
Yep.
What about when you talk to people who don't know what you're talking about? How do you alter the way you communicate? Yeah. And if you want to be a successful data leader, you got to be able to beef up those soft skills.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's providing the right narrative to the right audience. And I refer to it as demonstrating the art of the possible.
Sure.
So in the thinking with Matt at the moment, and I've talked about this before, is you think your business case is a legal case, and your legal case you need to sell. And there's a whole how you link that to evidence, and we talk about different evidence being the undisputable evidence, the smoking gun. Then there's the circumstantial evidence. Creating enough metrics that you can create a narrative around it. But I want to focus on probably the selling aspect of this bit. So, and how you fund that journey. So, for example, if you have a small case, a small department, you're talking to the CMO, your story needs to resonate with that CMO and explain what the art of the possible would be in a narrative that she can understand or they can understand, for example. And the CFO is going to have a different one. But if you can have the right story narrative to each of them, which all links back onto some business services that are underpinning them, shared components, undercurrents of what we would call I like to refer it as the business value data stack now, seeing the modern data stack was found dead in it was not there's been no suspicion at the moment. It was a natural cause of lack of investment. And
Professor Plum in the library with a candlestick.
Yeah, well, there's no evidence to prove that now, and because of legal ongoing cases, we cannot go into the details of that one now. But the modern data stack is dead, and I think it's now being replaced with the business value data stack. Okay. And I think if you can create the right narrative to get the right funding from the right people on that journey, but knowing what parts of your business value stack you're enhancing, leveling up, and maturing, which maybe enable other business value channels, other opportunities for you. But it's that journey. So it's how do you get that? How do you get that to become a very slick process? Because you don't want to have to keep going back and saying, "Here's some more. Can I have some more money, please, for this?" And as Joe pointed out on one panel I was on was, if you have to start justifying the cost of putting your socks on, what's the business value in putting your socks on? It gets very hard to if it gets down to that macro level. So, yeah, how would you approach that journey?
I think I started in the hardest part of data to prove value from, which is under that kind of behind the scenes foundational core data, master data, reference data, MDM, RDM, PIM, DAM, RAM, all these foundational activities that are very difficult to see, that are hard to show tangible, immediate return,
Yep.
but are literally foundational to everything else you do. So I always had a little bit of envy for analytics folks because they can actually show insight. Here, this percentage of this, or we did this and then that happened. Knowing that those thises and that's had to be based on really core foundational data. So my feeling is I started with the hardest stuff to sell in and explain, which means that these techniques that I used for that are extensible across everything that has to do with data. That's my assumption and logic there. I put a framework in the book. It's not something you'd, code off of, but I call it the 3 V's of data storytelling, which are, in my, obviously a knowing wink to Doug Laney's great work on the 3 V's of big data. I don't think mine are going to expand to 42 V's like Doug's did, but still we'll have a little control around that. But it was vocabulary, voice, and vision.
Yep.
And the idea is something you've already alluded to. Speak the right language. Speak the language of the business. If you're talking to finance, speak finance language. If you're talking to marketing, speak marketing language. That language includes the way they look at the business opportunities. Yep. You want to have a common voice. That's number 2. I mean, harmony, they got to harmonize to that voice. Harmony doesn't mean everybody sings the same notes, but it does mean they sound good together. So you and your team have to have this wrapped down. And we talk about sort of a slick version of it or a well-oiled version of it. It's probably a more positive way to spin it. But in any case, you're not redoing this every time and you're not making it up as you go along either. You've got a set of principles around this is why data is so important for the organization. This is what we're doing about it, and here's how we execute. I'm on the first finger. I just focus on the why. And that why has to come from the 3rd V, which is the vision of your company. Yep. Why does what you're doing in data, regardless of whatever it is, enable the strategic intention of your enterprise? Yep. Why does data help get you there? So no matter where you are in the business, a thing is you need to understand your business. That may seem like a cliche, but there's a lot of people out there who don't.
Yep.
And if you come from a really hard skills oriented world, which is good, and you have these really certifiable, and I mean that in a positive sense, talents and abilities because you know these languages, because you have this data science background, data engineering background, whatever it happens to be, you didn't necessarily learn some of these soft skills. And the irony in soft skills is that they're pretty hard to pick up too. Those have to do with going into a situation with your ears wide open to try and understand the dynamics of what's happening. What is my business? What does my company do? How do they do it? Why is it important? How do they bring value to their relationships through their brands at scale?
So so I mean, the point you've made there about it needs to be started with that strategy vision. So I see the CEO or the judge in a large case where each of the jurors are a C-suite. He should be setting that vision, that context of what he wants to achieve. What is this trial, this business case about for your whole company, and that should be from your business strategy or vision to what makes you a differentiator between other ones, what's going to increase your share price, or what's going to increase your bottom line in a positive way. Those things need to ripple down into different initiatives. But I think the key to is making sure you don't have conflicting ones. So you set an objective for one department that is going to have a negative effect on another one. So you incentivize partnership arrangements where your direct sales then compete internally against them. So making sure that everything ripples up to that overall goal and nothing is contradictory or can conflict with each other, then linking that down to what data do you need to achieve that. And each of those jurors will have a different objective, what they need to achieve, which has been set maybe by their personal objectives as an individual in the organization, the individual targets for that department, or any KPIs that may have been set that then being monitored against. So the point you're saying, it needs to be the right narrative. it needs to be what people are measured on, but also it needs to make sure that the CEO is not measuring the wrong things or not having them measure the wrong things.
I raise it up to an even more almost symbolic level of 3 places that people get value out of data: help grow the business, improve the business, protect the business. My talent, I believe part of it lies in the ability to boil things down to their essence and use. And a technique I use is, what's the fewest number of words I can use to explain something? So if you want to talk about all the ways that people get value out of data, I say there's only 3: grow, improve, and protect. Increase sales, operational efficiency, mitigate risk, or at least these are most of the things that most of the people who use most of their data get value from most of the time. There's always some guy in the back of the room with some kind of unique little edge case. But I try to focus on,
big wins.
You got 5 minutes with your CEO. How are you going to explain this? What are you going to say? You're going to talk about why it's important. You're not going to start pulling up your data model or all this work you did to get to a conclusion. They don't want to see all that. They don't want to show the math. They want in either a literal or figurative way. They want to understand why what you are doing is important for the business. And the higher up you get, the broader the view is generally. And while, to your example, marketing's got their story, finance got their story, operations got their story, or reasons why data is important, how do you make that a really succinct summary for the CEO who wants to understand? Okay, you've got lots of different departments here. The beauty of data that you know and I know is that it can enable all those things. Somebody, a LinkedIn user, said data is not an enabler. We'll tackle that in a minute. But it supports, it enables, it drives value for across the organization. So we have these wonderful opportunities to speak to the whole enterprise.
I think we've just covered Talia's question there. So I'll just put that one up.
Why is the most important aspect of storytelling? The why is the plot. The why is the story. Why it's important. Think about watching just the regular story. Why are these characters doing this? Where are they going? How do you you're not putting a movie together for your data story, but you're still drawing on the same elements of every type of storytelling, which is compelling content, engaging people, bringing them through a process where they understand beginning, middle, and end, because it's a sales story, ending up with a call to action like fund me. In some way, more resources, more people, more whatever it is, more software, more debt, whatever that funding aspect is, support me, engage with me, realize that this is important.
You said about selling to the CEO. I have another analogy I've used with the 747 cockpit. The pilot's just looking at the 3 dials. So your CEO is your pilot in this case. All he's looking at: share price, making sure he keeps his job, stickability for himself. Altitude, making sure that he's keeping above the shareholders' angry shouts. And that's the story that you need to give him, is how you're going to keep him in his job, how you're going to make him look good, how you're going to not have to get the calls at night from different departments all moaning about some problem that's happened. I think the other art of it as well is us data teams, and I've worked between the two, and I've been in the technical world and the business world, but I lived many of those years in that technical world. But what we didn't do well was communicating how we work with the business. And if we're able to, as a technical view lens point, from a capabilities perspective, from my architecture lens, if you're able to know, I know what I need to achieve. I'm not going to force it on the business to say, by the way, we're going to use this technology. Why? Because I know it's great. Rather than, what you need to achieve, but use these different projects as vehicles, enablers, that can harden, provide those capabilities, level up those capabilities in a way that's naturally being led by the business, rather than it being forced on. the IT team or data teams, you'll realize your dream. You'll get that platform you actually wanted rather than forcing it on them. And this is why I love this whole selling aspect. And as I speak to quite a few people in this topic, and one of them saying, you need to treat that FOMO experience of like, okay, you've done something for the marketing department. They go, my God, have you worked with that? Those guys, that data team down there, that department that do those graphs for us, they can do much more. They've just automated this whole business process for me, and now I'm more efficient with getting this many more leads. And I go, oh, well, that'd be interesting. Maybe I should go and speak to them and see what
maybe we
can
should
do.
let them in the room every once in a while.
Yeah, exactly.
You want to build this consensus, this network internally. I've got this in the book too. Find these data heroes. Salespeople will listen to other salespeople. Finance people listen to other finance people, and just keep that list, that database, however you want to structure it, of the folks who you've converted or on who get it. Okay.
The jurors are going to be on your jury when you're going off that next piece of budget. So the ones that just slam dunk, you don't have to convince them because they've seen the value historically provided.
Yeah, or they're witnesses even for your defense here who are saying that this helped me. Find those people and teach them. Use them to support your story. So it grows and grows to the point where when you do get up in front of the board, here's 15 examples or 12 of them or 10 of them, whatever it is, that show that data. In my general case, I'm usually talking about something foundational. So it's helping the whole company, but it helped operations this way, it helped finance this way, that starts to build on itself and obviously makes a better story for everybody. And they get to be involved in it. They get to be characters in your story to keep pushing this.
They become expert forensic data witnesses. They come in providing their evidence witness on the stand, and
and swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about. It's telling the truth, but also evidencing that proof in the best narrative possible. That resonates with each one of your jurors, and you don't want to try and convince a jury in any unethical way, but if you're making sure that you've delivered on time for them, made them look good, simplified their team's way of working. And I think that's the other thing is what's the problem that the business have that you can help with, and
that's the way to go too. I find that there's too much it feels like there's too much discussion in LinkedIn about trying to find that value and figuring out what data can do for the organization without the input. Those conversations don't always recognize the necessity of getting input from the company you're working for. Go talk to these people. Find out their problems. Find out these other department problems. They're there. We know data can help sales. Sales got all kinds of problems. They're trying to close more business faster. They're trying to reduce the sales cycle. They're trying to reduce customer churn. Operations is moving through, want more efficiency. Finance is looking for a quicker quote to cash process. Whatever the heck these things are, they're everywhere. They're everywhere across the organization. Instead of, we just figured out this really cool thing in what's the equivalent of a data petri dish, and we think it might have applications somewhere, but we invented it, and look at this really cool thing I can do. You may find, here's a tip. If you do have a cool little thing that works in some way in the back of your mind, or you've already done it and it's kind of in the back pocket there, wait till find somebody who expresses a problem that will solve. And before you go, oh yeah, I figured it out, go, all right, that sounds great. So if we did this with that and did it this way, do you think that would help?
Knowledge asset.
Yeah, it would. Okay. It's a little bit of, for me, that's storytelling. That's not bluffing. That's just like getting them engaged, making them realize that they're part of this ideation process. A cynical person would just say, oh, you want to make it you always want to make it their idea. Well, okay, that's one way to put it, but it's a little more organic than that. But still, it is that process.
And I think you're taking them on the journey. So it's a refinement. So if you can provide the art of the possible, they can then say, okay, I can see how that fits with my business. They know the business more than you. And it's a refinement. And you could say it was their idea, but as long as you're taking them on a journey and they feel they've had input and being able to shape the end goal, and adding value on that journey, then it's the main thing. And the other thing is, you said it's the why. Always asking the question why.
You gotta know the why.
Yep.
I mean, I've sat
why
with
do you do that? Yeah,
more than my share of CEOs, and I've had sometimes, or certainly earlier in my career than nowadays, hopefully, literally stop me and just go, "Why are you telling me this? Yep. Why is this important?
Why is it important? Exactly. Well, yeah.
I pitched a CEO in an elevator, so talk about a literal elevator pitch, and he goes, "What's the use case for this?" Which is another way of saying why. Why are you telling me this? Standing in an elevator, we're going from the first floor to the 6th floor, and I knew it. I had it. He was like, "Oh, okay," but expect that. Expect people to go, and have the answer.
Don't always expect them to be. I don't like using the word data literacy. It's I think it's a bit condescending. I think data enablement is another way.
There seems to be a couple of schools of thought here. I sat at CDO IQ last week in Boston and listened to two people I really admire have both poles in that. I thought, all right, there's a data literacy smackdown here. Ready to go. Let's get ready to wrangle.
Enablement, literacy.
One of them was like, "Oh, this is the perfect way to explain it." Another one was, "Why would you ever talk about it that way?" And I try and stay out of that. For me, it's like, what works? I try not to do zero sum with somebody and say, unless it's a really, personally, I think the term data literacy explains a concept in a way that people who don't know, and I don't know if anybody really how many people really feel like, are you calling me illiterate? Am I stupid? Well, how many people read books for dummies? All right. Are you a dummy? No, you're not a dummy, but it's just the way to position it, that realize, okay, this is the way to.
Exactly.
There was actually, but I did a bit once in a sales training course, and I had a book. Went through a bunch of sales books that people were familiar with, and I said, "Okay, selling for dummies." I went, "No, don't read this one. Selling is not for dummies.
But it's for everyone.
It's for everyone." So the term, if it works, and if it's you mentioned before, is it data literacy? Is it data enablement? Is it data? Make the point however you feel the point can be made. If you need to explain the nuances between those things and the deep meaning behind them, then that's a clue that it's the wrong term for that audience.
It comes down to like business terms and one department's view of an attribute, what it's known as, to another one. So where data modeling comes into it as well, and business catalogs. But I think I've had Ravit on there. Shout out to Ravit.
There he is. Top two hooks. So when you mean hook, do you mean sort of technique or just kind of lead in? I don't know which way.
I think probably lead in, I'd go with that. And I think we covered it with it's that business value and why. So so what's it going to make it? How's it going to make your life better? And then why do you do it in the way you're doing it if it's an optimization route?
A technique I use, which is to use people's words, I wouldn't say against them, but to explain what you're trying to do, but have a little drama attached to it. So many times going in, when I was representing Nielsen and Dun & Bradstreet, you go in with some quotes, with some anecdotes, something. The best example of this that I did was meeting with the president of Coca-Cola, like the president of Coca-Cola. And I had, short version of the story is, I had a bunch of quotes about customers and brands, and we had data about customers. And his quote was something along the lines of how important these customer relationships were for us. But I put it up as a headline and looked at the room and said, if you agree with this, hopefully you agree with this. And I pointed to the president and I said, I know you agree with this, because next slide, reveal his name underneath it in picture and where he said it in Forbes or wherever, because you said it. So now you have just a solid example. And it's rare that people are going to argue with themselves, especially at a high level, if you've published something. So again, I'm not trying to trap the guy, but it was a natural way to do it. And it led in, is like, yeah, of course. Okay, if you agree with that, then the data about your customers is not backing up the statement you meant about what you want to do with customers. Let me show you how. Here's all this crappy data you got about customer. I was in the master data business at that point. We had this master file of customers that he could leverage. We'd already been through all this other due diligence, but you don't start with the president. And so it was extremely effective in terms of a hook, because I grabbed them with, here's what your aspirations are. Another hook, the reverse side of that is, here are what your big problems are. And look for those. Look for in your own company, look at your own strategy statements. If you're a public company, look at your website, look at your annual report, look at your investor day presentation. If you're a governmental employee, look at what those filings are, what the politicians say. You'll find the hooks. And for us, I think the two biggest hooks in terms of topic areas are things about customers or relationships and things about your brands and products.
Exactly right.
And that's what most of your data is about.
Yeah.
Most of your data is about your products and your customers.
Yeah, I really like that, using their own words. And we've been in situations where we're playing back, the rationale and approach, the roadmap we're suggesting. And obviously, when you're talking to the lower other levels within the organization that are maybe emotionally attached to how it was, wouldn't admit that there was a problem there, or in their view, it's all going fine. But when you point out, well, hold on, it was in your annual report. Oh, hold on, it was in your CEO's opening statement here. So have you fixed it then? If you have, how did you do it? So we can let him know. And then it becomes a difference. Oh, well, maybe it's not quite there. Okay, let's see how we can help you achieve that. So I think really, really good approach. Taking.
I've got like 3 pages of questions in here, like how to figure out what your company does at this level in the book. So that's helpful. And it was basically the due diligence process. I taught my sales team when I was at Nielsen, and when I worked with the Dun & Bradstreet folks. Here's how to figure out the situation overview. Here are the dynamics you want to look for. Yeah, for an enterprise that are going to spin off or be the cause of data problems.
Yeah. So I think
they're easy to find. Once you see them, they're everywhere. It's like those magic eye books, those books where you kind of look and all of a sudden it's like, it's an elephant. I didn't know. It's like that. Once you can adjust your eyes and kind of see that, all of a sudden these problems become very visible, and you just get more and more attuned to picking them out. One short anecdote, I also worked with a lot of data providers and tried to figure out from them what their taxonomies were, how structured their data was. Okay. Yeah. And so I had a series of questions, and my record was 2 questions where I cracked a guy. So he was talking about this database, this service he had on brand activity. And I said, how many brands you have that you track? Oh, we have about 30,000. I said, do you have any sort of hierarchy structure where, for instance, Diet Coke and Coke Light and Coca-Cola roll up to the Coca-Cola company? And he said, we're working on it, which is supplier talk for no. Yeah. And it's like, you're done. Okay, we're done. We know that. I don't need to ask the next 5 questions, because you don't, you have entities, but you have no hierarchy. That's already a weak structure for the kind of work we were trying to do. Exactly. But I didn't start with some more esoteric stuff. It's really sort of numbers things to get a sense of scope and structure and things like that. So just an example of the idea that people can have a set number of questions or a set group of inquiries that you want to go and when you interview or talk to or just chat with a business person, to figure out what those problems are, to figure out what those challenges are. Yeah. It's
a natural path. You ask one question, it'll lead you down one route, which it'll I use the analogy of the river. It'll carve its natural path, the conversation, and actually lead you to where the actual problems are. And I think this is where people go in with a very rigid approach for an assessment and ask maybe all the Dharma questions in or however many there are, and then perform that. If you wouldn't have had to ask many of those questions, if you've gone through, okay, there's no point even going any further, because you haven't got this capability in place. And something we're trying to do at LEIT Data is we've come up with some assessment frameworks. Our assessment frameworks are give you that pulse, where you are at the moment, but also to give you a path of where you need to look at next. And the days of doing just one big strategy in one go, going back to the analogy of the jurors, each part of your business capabilities or data capabilities can be fueled or underpinned by many of those different jurors to give you the funding, and it's getting the right projects. I've got another view of a salesperson can only have 2 bad months because he's out the door otherwise. And he goes, okay, you didn't make your targets in 2 months. Yeah, you got. Maybe they're lucky; they might go on to the next quarter. CDOs, data teams, unfortunately, up until now, they've been long projects that we put all our eggs in one basket, and you can't provide that incremental or evidence or report that positive impact you've made regularly. And if you think of your portfolio of projects you've got in a way of, okay, right, I need to make sure I've got really good news for each quarter, something on there that will buy me time to go and get the other projects that are longer running, which maybe these smaller ones are feeding and enabling. And if you can create that regular story of good successes, that you don't, it's like a risk portfolio of projects. You don't put all your you don't get all in Bitcoin. You balance your portfolio with some real estate, with some with maybe some shares in some tech companies or however you want to invest your money. But you won't. You'll make sure that regularly, to go and when you go and look at your pension portfolio or something, it's had a positive impact each quarter. And I think that approach is the same sort of approach the data leaders need to make. Is you can't put all your eggs in one basket. You probably won't be in the role by the time your project you've been championing, if it's just the one project, gets to live. So making sure that the bite-sized chunks, I think you used that earlier, making sure your project or roadmap is delivered with bite-sized chunks. The bite-sized chunks have the right narrative to why you've got them from each of your sponsors. So those bite-sized chunks enable you to create better foundations, improve your internal processes, have tax to put your socks on, so your team don't have to justify the time spent to put their socks on, or doing technical debt, and technical debt's another really hard one to sell to get that on the backlog, because the business saying, well, hold on, I'm going to make this ROI from this project that someone's promised me if I do this. It probably won't give you the ROI that they're claiming. They'll probably never be held accountable when it doesn't happen. But the data team is then held accountable for how slow they move now, because the technical debt hasn't been addressed, because no one gives budget for it, even though the data team knows it is a good thing, but haven't been able to go and get the budget for it. So I did a post today about putting your socks on tax. So if you're adding something to how you work as an organization, so I think the views I've got on this is, you can have an internal charge rate. So, okay, right, there's a premium on when we're putting on projects to do this data initiative for you, and there's a little bit of putting my socks on tax that enables me to address some technical debt, maybe do a bit of R&D, maybe have an internal hackathon or something that creates that community, creates that team working better, more efficient with each other. I think the other route is you could put a small increase on your Snowflake credits or whatever credit, your AWS credits, your Google. So if you're using that, it requires a nice FinOps approach of where you can link it to who's using it, but you can generate that funding to BAU funding to optimize, refine what I refer to the business value data machine, the business value data stack. So you know that you can fuel that runway by incrementally evidencing the value, that get them off your back so you can just go and do what your data team knows needs to be done, but making sure it's underpinning what the business needs. So that's so we've probably got quite a few questions on here as well. All right, yes, George, that is a mini can of Coke. It was, but we were talking about
a teeny can of Coke here.
I haven't got a big hand.
It's my rocket fuel.
it's not a big hand. It's a small Coca-Cola.
There's some chatter about the MBOK, the data management book of knowledge going on here. I hear that according to Alberto, there's a version 3 coming out, but that's still Biblos, right? That's the Bible of there's not, if there is a version 3, I'm going to contact Emma because I'm happy to offer a chapter about data storytelling for data management. That's what's not covered in that book. And
I think it's one of the biggest capabilities is missing, really, because you can't achieve the rest of the book in an organization unless you know what story you need to tell to sell each of those pieces.
We tend to focus on how we're doing it in the data space versus why it's important. And that's why I try to really over-rotate on the why, being that voice, one of those voices in the community. I don't know how it's done. Okay. I don't do this stuff. Not a very well kept secret on my side is I'm not a practitioner. I never worked with enterprise software. I'm not a coder of any type. I just understand. I live in this gap between the IT technical and what's now more forming, rightly so, as the data side, and the business users, the business community that is trying to understand why it's important and live in that space, which for me is very comfortable. I love it there as that kind of conceptual translator of here's what they're trying to do. Here's why it's important.
Yeah, exactly.
Finding those clues. And, your legal case analogy, the courtroom, that all works.
Yep.
In terms of the dynamics that a lot of people sit through. Any kind of professional stuff. One I use a lot to explain to people why they need to come up with a business vocabulary is think of yourself as a doctor and a lawyer. If you've ever been to court or you've been in a medical situation, and when a doctor talks to another doctor, you don't understand what they're saying. When a lawyer talks to another lawyer, you really don't understand what you're saying.
They do that on purpose, though, so they can charge you more.
But there are words. But there are right. There are words that you say in court that a lay person will think they understand the meaning of, and in a legal context, those are very
it means a lot
things.
Yeah.
But when they go to their client, when they go to their patient, how do they talk? They talk, if they're good, they talk in the language of that client and patient. And so think about that as a construct you could use as a data leader. You're talking to other data people. It's one language. You're talking to business people. It's another. And the data people I hung out with, the ones I became really good friends with, knew I didn't understand it. So I used to partner up with a guy, Malcolm Hawker. He's out there now at Prophecy. You've probably seen him going. He and I were partners and toured the world talking when we were at Dun & Bradstreet. But we would get into more client call situations. And he actually said at one point, it was beautiful. I'm talking, I'm doing my thing. They get into some technical questions. And Malcolm actually turns to me and says, Scott, we're going to lose you here for a moment. And then goes into wah, 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 and they're going blah, 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 blah. And I just thought it was hysterical. As a true partner, he understood my strengths and weaknesses. And he knew, like, okay, and I don't bother to learn it. That's not my space. So I'm not going to get good enough at any of those things to make a difference. That's why I focus on really what I think the value I can bring to a conversation.
And that's a good analogy for your own building your own data team. Is you have many tools, and many different skills in there that collectively give you the best toolbox that give you you can adapt to any situation that's out there. So playing to everyone's strengths is a big thing. I'll go back to the old Dharma book and my days in architecture of like TOGAF as well, which is a methodology. And again, I think this is a downside of the data industry is that it's all brilliant. It's everything you would want to do in the correct order, with the right level of detail in every single document, how it's all linked together. Unfortunately, the business doesn't work that way, because to do all these things, you need to go and get funding to achieve it. You can't go and say we're going to need this business service without saying why for your view. And I think it's a good guideline to refer back to say, look, okay, let's go look to Dharma or look to TOGAF to see, okay, what sort of documents would be useful to create during this piece of the puzzle I'm performing, or maybe the high level skeleton you're going to work off as your backbone of your strategy that you go and hang things off at a later date. I think I've got another analogy I use, which is now in the world of EVs and electric vehicles, we've got to work out, when we charge them, we've got to get the best kinetic energy use of them on the journey. My old days of driving like sports cars is, now I wouldn't be able to go and overtake the car that just overtook me because I may not have enough electricity or enough battery power to get to the next filling station. So I would have had to probably stay within the speed limits, which was maybe a good thing, or it is a good thing. But that, if you think of your data strategy as a journey you're going on, and you don't exactly know where it's going to take you, you're hopefully on the highway, Route 66, or you're going in the general right direction. But you need to plan out every time you need to refuel. And there's other things on that journey. Okay, I can utilize the kinetic energy on that journey as well, which, swapping that into a business sort of context, I think kinetic energy is things that maybe other parts of your project that are generating that you can go and reuse. Maybe it's reusing a conformed dimension, an adapter that's already there, a framework, as you mentioned. Oh, I've already built one of them. That they can help make you more efficient on your journey. So when you get to your next stop where you need to go and get that next level of funding or that next recharge of your electric vehicle, it becomes a very slick process. I know now, I drive up, I plug it in, it's on a fast charge, I swipe the card here, it provides all of the details they need to make it happen. I know I can carry on my journey, so all my resources or my time schedules is not affected because I've had to go for a very slow process of recharging my EV because I had to go and speak to many people, or didn't have the right flow to procure it. You need to make that a very slick process, and I think you do that with storytelling and with evidence. So each time, what I said I did last time, I've got you to this part of the journey. I'm not going to tell you if I've got extra fuel still left, because that could be my putting my socks on tax that I use for my department to make my car, make the machine more efficient. Minimize drag. I like the term friction as well. Is another term I use. Is friction is cumulative time, effort, and complexity to perform an activity. And if you keep doing that activity, it will get to a point where its friction is now a point that it's worth now addressing and automating, changing, optimizing. And I think, using that analogy of the electric vehicle, on that journey, you can speed, you can become more streamlined, you can get better, more efficient tires, you can oil the different wheels in the right ways to make you more efficient. And you're recharging to get that funding. If you've got the right story with the right narrative, that you've become a nice, a well-oiled process of delivering it, you're going to get to that journey with less wastage, less effort going on a detour or hanging around on a roundabout for a while, waiting for your next funding.
The analogy is important. Simile is important. Those figures of speech are all important. My tip is use the ones that are applicable to your business as a shortcut. So the EV example probably works great. You're not going to walk into public transportation as, group to use EV or airline necessarily. Not that it doesn't work at a cocktail party, but finding these hooks, to Ravit's point, they're lying around your organization, especially imagery wise. If you use use your own business as an analogy. So if you do work at an oil and gas company, then fine, data is your new oil. That's the only place you should really use it. After that, I'll take it's going to take another LinkedIn Live for me to finish my rant on why data is the new oil is so terrible as a way to explain it. But if you're a healthcare company, data is the lifeblood of our organization. A healthy business runs on healthy data. Whatever it is, use your company's slogan and mess with it a little bit. Put the word data in there instead of something else. See if that works. Try it. But the whole point of all these kinds of figures of speech is to shorten the distance for your audience to understand what you're saying.
Yep. how quick it
The
is for them to
caution
understand
is
it.
don't use something too complicated. Don't use
Right.
something too far afield. Don't use analogies for a situation that's different than what your business does. A really bad example was I talked to a data leader at a tobacco company who was sharing with me how good data is like breathing in fresh air and you want to bring it into your, I'm like, don't even go there, man. That's not going to play in this. You're right, but that's not the right thing to use.
Yeah, exactly.
So wanting that poetry, as I like to say, that helps it with engagement, that helps with understanding, that people get it. And you've got to do that work. You've got to do that work to map these elements of whatever your data project are to the imagery and brand positioning of your own business. It's exceptionally effective if you can do that well.
Yeah, definitely. I got a question here from Wissam. How do you master storytelling? So we've touched on this a little bit.
As a couple of things, we talk about data storytelling. Most of the data storytelling conversation goes on about the data. Split up the other words, story and telling.
Yeah.
The telling part, which has to do with experience. Yes, get better at it. Get in front of people. Get those butterflies out. Or in my case, I learned to use them. Do I always get what I feel is nervous before a big event? Of course you do, but then you realize, finally the penny dropped for me and like, this is excitement. Yeah. It's not nerves. I'm not concerned about blowing it. I'm excited about doing it. Use that energy to drive you up there. I'm an exception. I have a fear of not public speaking. So that's what I do. But that telling part takes an incredible amount of technique. Toastmasters, whatever. Do whatever you can do. Go to your own organization who probably has some sort of support in presentation skills, communication skills, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think less is more. I think when any pitch deck, slide deck, you can add more words when it's on there, but it's.
I quote a tip from a friend of mine. She called it the Coco Chanel rule of putting decks together. So apparently Coco Chanel, when she would get all decked out, no pun intended here, would then remove some accessory, like some extra thing. So her advice was always do your whole presentation, then remove a couple. What can you live without? How can you make this shorter? I just thought that was a wonderful way to put it. The other element is the story element. There is a plot to this. There is a development. There is, if you study Shakespeare, there's the 5-act structure that everybody can just literally map between kind of exposition and rising action and climax and denouement and then the conclusion. There's a way, a natural way that people want to hear about things. For me, if I watch a really great movie at home or on stream it or something, or even a whole series, I like to go back and watch the first part of it again to see how that exposition played out. If you watch Breaking Bad and you watch however 7 seasons of it, when it was all over, I watched the first episode all over again, and it was amazing how many things they telegraphed that you didn't notice, you didn't see, props, little glimmers, little symbols that just came out there. So exposition is really important in terms of and what exposition does is kind of explain the characters. Here's the situation we're in a classic sort of storytelling aspect.
Yeah.
But I had somebody last month ask me, it was this graduate student, and he came up to me at the conference and he just said, okay, what's your one, what's your one tip? And it was learn how to tell a story. And he said, so presentation skills, communication. I said, yeah, that's important. Those are techniques, but you also have to have some understanding of what a story is.
Yeah.
When you have a story that's ready, and you can go to a movie that had a famous director, $100 million special effects budget, all these actors that you knew, and the movie can still suck. Yeah. That's happened to all of us. And the reason it sucked was the story sucked. Yeah. The story wasn't there. So
Exactly.
know and understand what a story is. We can't do it all in the last couple minutes here, but just know that that's a thing that you got to focus on, the story part and the telling part.
So I think something you just triggered me thinking. We'll come back to George's question in a minute. And shout out to George from Canada. Thanks for tuning in.
Hey,
But
George.
yeah,
How you doing, baby?
I think it's linking a story. So if you want to realize your full data strategy, and you know you need all these capabilities from a data bottom up sort of approach, but you need to do it in the right order and get with the right funding driven off the business value. If you have a story that is mapped to those different capabilities, and some stories will provide you funding for multiple capabilities, and if you have the right story and then maybe tweak that story to the purse holder, the stakeholder that's going to be giving you that funding, you can actually have a story to architectural business services, which links to technologies, which realizes that value quicker. But I think we'll probably wrap up on maybe George's one we'll cover on this one is what do you think vendors can do more to help companies with their data issues?
I mean, George, aren't there a ton of vendors out there who help companies with their data issues? I saw this question. If you're a data, what happens though is most software companies, to just overgeneralize the risk of pissing somebody off here. Most software companies, they do a demo, and the demo always looks great, right?
Yep.
Everything demos well because the data in the demo is perfect.
Yep.
And then you get the software, and then it doesn't work right, and then they go, "Well, your data sucks." So it's so in the vendor space, there's the folks who help on the software side, and then there's the folks who I spent most of my career with when I was doing stuff like that, which were people who could literally improve the quality of your data, the structure of your data, and directly related to that becomes the value of your data. If you have an unduplicated, well-structured, hierarchical taxonomy pieces to your customer data, you're going to get more out of it.
Yep.
And that was kind of the story we tried to tell in ways that, shifting to how why you explain that story, explaining why data quality is important is really hard because quality is a really emotional word, and you need to show them some examples, but you also need to, as we've talked about, link that to where the company's going, and that's I know we're wrapping up here, so I won't
on that, I think someone asked me what is bad data, and I think it's anything that actually impairs the decision you're going to make with it. So it could be the missing data, it could be inaccurate, it could be duplicated. It could be multiple things, but if it causes you to make a bad decision in your company, it's bad data.
Yeah.
But
good decisions made on bad data are just bad decisions you don't know about yet.
Yes, that's very true.
Most quoted quote.
Yeah, very true. So in the last few minutes, I'll just on the current comment. So I think it's been absolutely fantastic. You're going to be over at Big Data London, I understand.
I'm in Big Data London with George. George will be there too.
Yeah.
And 8 other data vendors. We are all uniting at Big Data London. So look for us. We're aiming to make all kinds of noise and have some fun. All of us are literally on stage. So excellent. I have I'm thrilled to be a featured speaker at Big Data London and be on the big keynote stage. I'm opening for Joe. So Joe's right after me. I'll warm him up for you, Joe. Unless you want to switch spots, we can talk about that later. But my title of my keynote, I think, lays right into the issues that we're dealing with. It's called "Data's the New Bullshit." So that's hopefully that doesn't get you kicked off LinkedIn Live, but
I don't think so. But
it really does focus on the crazy data speak that we all spend way too much time on, and then not to be just totally destructive. I do have some, okay, here's how I think you could make it better. So I am trying to give some advice and some tangible value rather than just riff on how ridiculous everybody sounds. But it should be fun. That should be fun.
I always get value from conversation with you, and I'm pretty sure the audience would agree. Your ability to tell storytelling about storytelling. which
Yes,
is,
I'm
you
very
know,
good.
it's like it's taking it to the next level of hierarchy. You have a
Meta
hierarchy
is
of
the name
storytelling.
of our company, Meta Consulting. We're about what it's about. That's
Yeah, and it's quite funny because I use the term metadata, which is now the concept of everyone like collecting their metadata together and being the data about data, which I think is the next one. Which
there's metadata, data about data. There's metadata, data about data. Then there's Seinfeld data about nothing.
I love it. I love it. So I think I'm just going to add to stream what we got next. So the next scheduled one, we've got Ariane from Shipyard, where we're talking about increasing value by decreasing friction. So a little bit about automation and just what she's been seeing in the data world. So I'm looking forward to that. Scott, absolute pleasure. Looking forward to seeing you in.
Always great to see you, Chris. Maybe we'll see each other in the summer at one of these meetups.
Yeah,
here.
yeah. Hopefully
in London. And thank you for having me. Delighted.
No, truly honored, mate. Truly honored.
Early episodes, no problem.
Yeah, no, thank you. And we've set the bar pretty high with the people we've had on so far. So, and I'm getting a bit better at this hosting thing. So yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. But absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Cool.
And thank you everyone for tuning in. Speak to you soon. Okay.